My friends, I speak to you not from the cold perspective of a ledger, but from the heart of a man who has observed the machinery of human nature as closely as the machinery of the steel mill. Within every man lives a flame so ancient and so insistent that he cannot remember a moment of life without its heat. It stirs in the restlessness of youth, grows into a demanding pressure in manhood, and, if left to its own devices, burns through a man's years without producing a single ounce of permanent value. This flame is what the world often calls desire, or, in its coarser moments, lust. But I invite you to see it as it truly is. It is the original energy of life itself. It is the raw, vital current through which all creation moves. Most men are terrified of this fire. They feel its surge and believe they are broken or uniquely flawed. They feel a pressure that pulls their attention, drains their focus, and demands an immediate release. They are taught by a timid world to suppress this desire, to be ashamed of its intensity, and to drown it out with the noise of distraction. But I tell you this: power without direction creates only exhaustion and ruin. However, that inner fire was never meant to control you, nor was it meant to be wasted. When misunderstood, it destroys the very foundation of discipline. When ignored, it turns into a bitter frustration that poisons the character. But when mastered, when it is truly mastered, it becomes the magnificent engine behind every enduring accomplishment known to civilization. You have likely felt the exhaustion of the common cycle, bursts of fierce motivation followed by a total collapse of the will, intense ambition followed by the triviality of distraction. This is not a sign of weakness, it is the tragedy of misdirected force. You must understand that desire is not the enemy of discipline, it is its raw material. The very same energy that pulls a man's mind toward fleeting pleasure is the exact same energy that builds empires when it is redirected with intelligence and a steady hand. In my studies of the most successful figures of our age, I found that they did not lack the passions of the common man. Quite the contrary, they possessed them in abundance. The difference lay in the mechanism of conversion. Most people allow their energy to leak into impulse, seeking the relief of the moment rather than the results of a lifetime. They are at internal war, and internal war always drains the strength needed to build anything of substance. There is a law that governs this force, a law that has been nearly erased from our common discourse, not because it is dangerous, but because it is overwhelmingly powerful. This law does not ask you to become less human or to deny your nature. It asks you to become more deliberate. It teaches you to take the strongest impulses you possess and redirect them upward, transforming urgency into endurance and raw passion into a definite chief aim. When you feel that powerful surge within, do not flee from it. Do not apologize for your vitality. That energy is the signal that power is available for use. When it is guided instead of released blindly, it multiplies your effort. You have seen men with less talent surpass those with more. You have watched focus outlast intelligence. The difference was never their capacity, but their ability to convert raw inner force into disciplined, productive action. This conversion does not happen by accident. It requires the twin tools of intention and repetition. Without them, desire is your master. With them, desire becomes your most obedient servant. Consider the river. When it overflows its banks without purpose, it brings only flood and destruction to the valley. But when that same volume of water is confined within the narrow walls of a gorge and forced through the turbines of a powerhouse, it illuminates entire cities. So it is with the vital energy of a man. If you block it entirely without guidance, it will carve its own ruinous path through your character. Suppression is a fool's errand. It breeds a disease of the body and a profound confusion of the mind. Indulgence is equally treacherous, for it breeds a fatigue of the soul and a lingering guilt that dissolves self-respect. The only path to greatness is redirection. By this, I mean the conscious act of turning the same energy that seeks physical sensation toward the pursuit of a high and noble purpose. Every emotion carries motion within it. If you deny that motion, you create stagnation, and in stagnation, the spirit rots. But if you give it command, that raw heat becomes enthusiasm, vision, and an almost superhuman persistence. I think often of Thomas Edison. He was a man of such deep restlessness that his nerves constantly demanded expression. Where another man might have exhausted that nervous energy in the pursuit of temporary leisure or vice, Edison poured every drop of his intensity into the silence of his laboratory. What the world called a divine obsession was simply a man who had found the right channel for his fire. In that furnace of focus, 10,000 failures were not defeats. They were merely the dross being burned away from the gold of his ultimate discovery. I will be plain with you. My own early ambition was not born of pure virtue. It was a hunger for conquest, a restless appetite to rise above the poverty of my youth. The same hunger that drives some men toward the destruction of their neighbors drove me toward the building of an industry. The difference was the structure. When I discovered order, when I harnessed that hunger to a definite purpose, the appetite became discipline. My mills and factories were not merely buildings of brick and mortar. They were the physical reflection of a mind that had learned to stay under command. You must look at Napoleon Bonaparte as both a lesson and a stern warning. His inner fire, when directed by a vision for a unified Europe, built an empire that reshaped the world. But when that fire was seized by the vanity of his own ego, it became a conflagration that devoured him. Energy that is not governed by a moral purpose will always consume the vessel that holds it. You are that vessel. Understand that every act of creation begins as emotional heat. The cold intellect alone builds nothing. It can calculate, it can measure, and it can weigh, but it cannot breathe life into a dream. Emotion is the spark, direction is the wick. When you feel the heat of desire rising within you, you must learn to ask one question with absolute sincerity. Where shall I direct this power? The man who asks this and answers with action separates himself from the drifting masses. For where emotion meets order, miracles of industry and art are born. A man who denies his emotions denies his engine, but the man who masters them turns the chaos of his nature into the harmony of his career. I have studied thousands of successful men, men of steel, men of finance, and men of letters, and I tell you with the certainty of 80 years of experience, not one ever achieved greatness while despising his own nature. They learned to master it, not to mutilate it. The power that builds worlds cannot be conquered through shame. It must be trained through respect. Desire only becomes sacred when it serves a purpose higher than the self. The same current that rushes toward the lower pleasures, when directed upward, becomes the faculty of imagination. Indeed, imagination is nothing more than passion ascending into the realm of thought. Thought, held long enough and with enough intensity, becomes a plan. And a plan acted upon with unwavering faith becomes a creation that the world must acknowledge. There exists within every man a moment of supreme choice, a split second where an impulse appears and the faculty of reason awakes. This is the crossroads of your destiny. This is the moment of redirection. The man who recognizes this flash of time can steer the current of his nature toward a task, a vision, or a cause. but the man who ignores it becomes a servant of habit and a slave to circumstance. When emotion rises in your breast, do not be startled. Breathe and aim. This is not the work of a day or a week, it is the labor of a lifetime. Fire under command provides warmth for the home and light for the path. Fire unrestrained destroys both the house and the master. The most misunderstood of all truths is that emotion fuels thought. You may have been taught to think coldly, to separate your reason from your feeling as if they were oil and water. Yet I say to you that thought without emotion is lifeless. It is a locomotive without steam. Conversely, emotion without thought is reckless. It is steam without the engine. The two together, harmonized under a single will, form the quality we call genius. To attach your deepest feelings to a definite aim is to give birth to power. To attach those same feelings to fear, to doubt, or to the mere indulgence of the senses is to scatter your power to the four winds. The disciplined man becomes a lens, focusing every ray of his inner sun into a single point until it burns through every obstacle. The undisciplined man remains a fog, vast perhaps, but unable to leave a mark upon the world. I do not ask you to suppress your desires. I ask you to command them. My own energy serves my creation, not my escape. What once might have distracted me now drives me with a relentless force. You must adopt this same posture. You must become the alchemist of your own soul, recognizing that the lead of your basic impulses can be transmuted into the gold of character and achievement. Look at your own life. How much of your vital fire has been leaked away through the cracks of idle talk, wandering thoughts, and fleeting gratitudes? How much power have you surrendered to the appetite of the moment, only to find yourself bankrupt when the time came to build your future? This waste must stop today. Your call to action is this. Before the sun sets this evening, you must sit in silence and define your purpose. Do not speak of wanting success in vague terms. That is the language of the drifter. Write down in plain and bold ink the one great service you intend to render or the one great work you intend to build. This shall be the furnace for your fire. From this moment on, every time you feel the surge of desire or the restlessness of your spirit, you will consciously cast that energy into your written purpose. Do not seek release, seek result. Take that inner heat and forge one single productive act toward your goal. Command your fire now, or be prepared to be consumed by it. You must realize that the mind, when fueled by converted desire, enters a state of heightened vibration. This is not the feverish heat of a man possessed by a temporary whim. It is the steady, glowing radiance of a mind that has found its center. Achievement is not built on motivation alone, for motivation is as fickle as the weather. Lasting achievement is built on converted energy that continues to work long after the first flush of emotion has settled. This is the hallmark of the man of character. His energy does not spike and crash, it circulates. It feeds his thought, strengthens his resolve, and sustains his effort when others have long since retired from the field. When desire is redirected, focus sharpens with the precision of a master craftsman's tool. Distraction weakens because it no longer finds fertile soil in which to grow. Decision becomes easier because there is no internal conflict to muddy the waters. The mind stops fighting itself, and all internal forces begin moving in the same direction. This alignment feels unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. A calm replaces the old urgency, a certainty replaces the old craving, and with that shift, your work becomes deeper, steadier, and far more productive than frantic effort could ever hope to be. Most people will never learn this. They will spend their entire earthly existence swinging like a pendulum between impulse and restraint, between pleasure and guilt, between motivation and collapse.
They do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because no one showed them how to convert their power instead of wasting it. This law was never meant to be popular among the masses. It demands a level of responsibility that most find terrifying. It removes the excuses we use to justify our lack of progress. It requires you to stop blaming your desires and start directing them. That level of ownership is uncomfortable for those who prefer to drift with the tide. If you are listening with the ear of the soul, you already feel the truth of what is possible. It is not about suppression, and it is not about indulgence. It is about command. It is the ability to turn the strongest force within you into a steady forward motion that neither wavers nor tires. Once you understand this art, nothing about your effort, your focus, or your results will ever feel the same again. You will look upon a difficult task not with dread, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who knows he has the steam in his boiler to climb any grade. I have observed that the greatest leaders are those who have the most vital fire to subdue. A man of weak desire may be easily disciplined, but he will never move the world. He lacks the fuel. The man of great achievement is almost always a man of great appetite, but he is a man who has built a massive storage battery for his energy. He allows the pressure to build within him, refusing to let it leak out through the traditional vents of physical release or idle gossip. He holds that pressure until it reaches a white-hot intensity, and then he channels it through the narrow aperture of his work. This stored energy creates what the world calls magnetism. Have you ever stood near a man who seemed to vibrate with an unspoken power? He may be silent, yet he commands the room. He does not plead for attention, he attracts it, as a magnet attracts iron filings. This is not a gift of birth, it is the result of transmutation. He has kept his fire within. He has refused to scatter his vital forces. Consequently, his presence carries the weight of 1,000 harnessed impulses. He has become a reservoir of power, and men instinctively follow those who possess a surplus of redirected energy.
There is a sacred point in every man's development when he ceases merely to restrain his energy and begins to govern it. To restrain is a defensive act. It is the act of a man hiding behind a shield, halting motion, but breeding a secret, bitter frustration. To govern is a creative act. It is the work of the engineer who redirects the rushing current toward a chosen purpose. The moment you begin to govern your desire, you are no longer a slave to your emotions. You have become the master of your destiny. You must accept the first principle of the soul's physics. You cannot destroy energy. It is eternal. You can only convert it from one form into another. The same current that pulls a man toward a life of aimless indulgence can, with a shift of the will, pull him toward invention, toward the building of libraries, or toward the mastery of a craft. I call this process the furnace of conversion. It is the place where chaos becomes command, where the raw impulse of the flesh is refined into the structure of the spirit. Inside this furnace, the heat of emotion meets the mold of discipline. Most people live at war with this furnace. They fear the intensity of their own feelings because they do not understand that intensity is the very fuel of creation. When desire rises, they rush to extinguish it through the nearest distraction. They never realize that each surge of energy was a golden opportunity, raw material waiting to be forged into progress. Logic may design the blueprint of a life, but emotion provides the fire to make it real. A mind without emotion is a lamp without oil. It may be beautiful to look upon, but it provides no light to a dark world. The walls of your furnace are your daily disciplines, your fixed schedule, your written purpose, and your chosen aim. These walls keep your energy concentrated where it can do the most work. Without them, the flame escapes into the air and is wasted.
Every act of excessive indulgence is an act of leakage. Each time you surrender your focus to a fleeting pleasure, you are emptying the reservoir before it has the chance to become power. The man who indulges his appetites without restraint loses more than just his vitality. He loses his vision. His imagination, once sharp and clear, becomes clouded by the dross of his own excesses. Repeated indulgence dulls the edge of the mind. The appetite that once inspired a man to rise in the morning soon becomes the chain that keeps him in bed. This is why the greatest achievements of history have come from men who learned the art of delayed gratification. They turned the fire inward, allowing the pressure to mount until it burned through every limitation and erupted into inspiration. The creative mind is the natural outlet of a redirected life. When physical intensity is guided upward, it becomes the spark that lights art, industry, and leadership. Henry Ford did not seek to kill his obsession with the mechanical, he refined it. What began as a restless, churning energy in a farm boy's breast became a precision-tooled empire. He poured his emotional intensity into every valve, every piston, and every process. His persistence was not a cold, mechanical thing. It was emotional fire converted into disciplined motion. He held his heat until it became steel. Understand this clearly. The mechanical process of transmutation is simple in its law, yet it requires the courage of a lion in its practice. It follows a divine chain. Thought directs emotion, emotion fuels action, and action crystallizes the idea into reality. When these three are harmonized, the result is the manifestation of genius. If you break the chain at any point, if you allow your thought to wander or your emotion to scatter, the energy disperses into the ether, and you are left with nothing but a weary heart. To master this chain, you must begin with the thought. You must fix your mind upon one definite purpose with such clarity that it becomes more real to you than the walls of the room in which you sit. Desire alone without a fixed aim is nothing but wind howling in the desert. But desire fixed upon a purpose becomes a gale that moves mountains and parts the seas of opposition. You must give your energy a target, or it will surely target you. Next, you must feed your emotion into this thought. You must learn to feel the reality of your success as if it were already achieved and sitting in the palm of your hand. The subconscious mind, that silent clerk of our destiny, cannot distinguish between a vivid imagination and a physical reality. It accepts what you feed it with repetition and conviction. Each time you visualize your high aim with the heat of your passion, you are instructing the silent forces of your nature to bring that aim into being. You are in effect magnetizing your very cells to attract the resources you require. Then, and only then, must you act. Thought and emotion without action remain mere vapor, the daydreams of the idle. Action is the bridge between the invisible realm of the spirit and the visible realm of the material. It is the physical signature of your faith. Each act, no matter how humble, channels the energy from your inner reservoir into a tangible form. When you work with this converted fire, you do not tire as other men do. You are drawing from a well that does not run dry, because your work has become the natural outlet for your vital force. I have seen men turn the most crushing defeats into glorious triumphs through this very law. I once knew a clerk, a man weary of his own obscurity and poverty. He began a ritual of reciting his purpose each dawn with the intensity of a prayer. I am building an enterprise that serves millions. His fellows at the office laughed. They saw only his thoroughbred coat, but his tone remained steady, for he was feeding his inner fire into that sentence. Within a few short years, the opportunity he sought appeared, and his business flourished beyond his wildest dreams. He had done nothing mystical. He had simply redirected his emotional current toward consistency. Another man I observed was once plagued by the most destructive of habits, a man whose appetites were his masters. Through a moment of total desperation, he discovered the power of the furnace. Each time his old temptations rose to claim him, he transmuted that surge of energy into a specific action. He would study, he would write, he would build. The energy that once sought his ruin became the very power that liberated him. Today, he stands as a leader of industry, a living proof that discipline is nothing more than redemption in motion. Repeat these truths to yourself until they are etched into your character. My passion is the fuel for my creation. I master my energy by direction, not denial. Desire, when purified by purpose, becomes the spark of genius.
You must also understand the grave danger of imbalance in this delicate work. There are two paths to failure in the management of your inner fire: the path of the ascetic and the path of the libertine. Too much suppression, the attempt to murder your own nature, turns the spirit into a dry husk and transforms passion into a bitter, resentful cynicism. Conversely, too much indulgence turns the man into a soft and vacuous creature, a spendthrift of the soul who has no pressure left to drive the wheels of industry. The true master walks the middle path. He is an alchemist who understands that he must neither freeze nor boil his materials, but maintain a steady heat that facilitates transformation. I have observed that the highest form of human energy is imagination. Imagination is the higher body of desire. It is passion dressed in the robes of vision. The man who neglects his imagination starves his potential at the root. You must feed your mind with pictures worthy of its power. Let your desires climb upward into ideas that serve humanity, rather than sinking downward into habits that serve only the flesh. Persistence is nothing more than the rhythm of this controlled fire. It is the habit of returning daily to the furnace of your purpose and feeding it just enough fuel to keep the gears turning, never so much that the machine explodes, and never so little that the fire dies. Persistence is not a stubborn, unthinking bullheadedness. It is a loyal and unwavering devotion to direction. It is the long patience that the French speak of as being the foundation of genius. You will know you are beginning to master this conversion when you no longer find yourself dependent on external stimulation. The craving for applause, the thirst for novelty, and the constant pursuit of fleeting pleasures lose their grip upon your heart. Your fire begins to burn inwardly, steady, self-contained, and remarkably calm. You have ceased to be a needer and have become a creator. You no longer look to the world to give you excitement. You look to your purpose to give you life. To reach this stage of development, you must build a ritual around your purpose. Ritual is the anchor that hitches your wandering emotions to a productive routine. It teaches the subconscious mind that your vital energy now belongs to your discipline. Every morning, write your aim. Every afternoon, perform a service that moves you toward it. Every evening, review your progress with a cold and honest eye. Each of these acts is a strike of the hammer, shaping the molten metal of your will into a form that can withstand the tests of time. Do not be discouraged if your fire feels chaotic at first. Be patient with yourself. The furnace must be operated daily to reach its peak efficiency. A fire that burns too fiercely at the start often consumes its material and leaves only ash. A fire that is nurtured with steady, daily effort refines the material into a precious metal. Do not chase after flashes of inspiration. Create an environment of consistency where inspiration feels welcome to stay. True genius is not a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. It is the slow, unstoppable glow of a coal that has been fanned by the breath of discipline.
You will know you are mastering the conversion of your inner forces when you notice a change in how the world reacts to your very presence. This is the stage where the inward work begins to manifest as an outward magnetism. When a man no longer leaks his vital energy through the common vents of impulse and excess, he becomes a storage battery of immense power. People will feel your energy even in your silence. They will sense a strength behind your restraint that they cannot quite name, but which they instinctively respect. Opportunities, which seem to flee from the desperate and the scattered, begin to gather around the man of steadiness. This is not a matter of luck, it is a matter of law. Fortune follows order. The world obeys the man who has first mastered his own furnace. When your internal forces are all moving in the same direction, you become a center of gravity. Confusion and discord begin to depart from your circle, for they cannot exist in the atmosphere of a disciplined mind. This mastery is not a cold, life-denying detachment. It is warmth directed upward. Love, creativity, and leadership all spring from the same root as passion. They are simply the fire purified by understanding. When you elevate your desire, you do not lose your humanity, you fulfill it. Beware the false teachers who preach that denial is a virtue in itself. To kill emotion is to kill half of your strength and all of your beauty. Virtue lies not in the absence of passion, but in the dominion over it. The Creator did not place this power within you to be feared, but to be used wisely for the advancement of the race. I have watched such men ascend quietly in every industry, from the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the banking houses of London. Their rise appears effortless to the casual observer, who sees only the result and not the process. But their secret lies here. They draw from an internal wellspring that others constantly spill. Because they do not waste their energy on the trivial, they have a surplus of power to apply to the vital. They are never hurried, never desperate, and rarely fatigued. To maintain this flame, you must learn the sacred art of stillness. Stillness is not the absence of motion, it is motion without friction. When the mind ceases to argue with itself, action becomes effortless. The man who acts from a place of internal stillness moves with the quiet, irresistible force of nature itself. His mind remains sharp but quiet, like the blade of a sword resting in its sheath, ready for the moment it is required. This restraint gives rise to the highest form of confidence. People trust the man who governs himself because they know his emotions will not betray his principles. His composure creates faith in those around him, and as I have often said, faith is the first currency of success. Money is merely the shadow that follows the substance of character. If you wish to increase your wealth, you must first increase the pressure within your own boiler by refusing to let your energy escape through the cracks of your character.
There comes a day in a man's journey when he realizes that true mastery is not actually about control, it is about peace. Control implies a constant struggle, a hand forever white-knuckled upon the reins of a wild horse. Peace, however, belongs to the man who has reached a state of deep understanding. The moment you realize that the fire within you was never your enemy, you cease wrestling with it. You stop fearing its strength, and you learn to walk beside it as one walks beside a trusted friend. Together, you travel toward your purpose without the friction of internal resistance. When the fire becomes obedient, the very texture of your life changes. You no longer swing between the exhaustion of restraint and the guilt of indulgence. The energy that once agitated your nerves and clouded your judgment becomes the calm, rhythmic heartbeat behind every one of your creations. The restlessness that once drove you to seek mindless relief now fuels a quiet, ironclad endurance. What the world once called lust has been elevated.
It has become a profound love for your work, a sacred devotion to your cause, and a reverence for your own ability to build something that will outlast your physical frame. At this height of transmutation, you no longer feel your impulses as a temptation to be overcome. You feel them as a direction. You sense within yourself an invisible current, a still small voice of energy, guiding your thoughts, your speech, and your timing. You move through the marketplace not as one who struggles for air, but as one who is carried by a vast and unseen rhythm. This is the state of harmony with the law of increase. All lasting achievement springs from this harmony. Effort alone eventually exhausts itself, and discipline without joy grows brittle and snaps under pressure. But when desire and discipline walk hand in hand, they form the unbreakable chain of perseverance. I ask you to consider the character of Abraham Lincoln. His life was a furnace of sorrow, ambition, and deep emotional longing. Yet he never permitted that internal pressure to waste itself in the bitterness of resentment or the fog of distraction. He transmuted his vast emotional reserves into a boundless patience and an empathy that could hold a crumbling nation together. His deep nature, which might have been a burden to a lesser man, became the very source of his strength. The flame that could have consumed him instead provided the warmth and light that a divided people needed to find their way back to union. Think also of the man of science or the captain of industry who stays at his task through the long night of failure. To the casual observer, he looks fatigued. In truth, he is sustained. His fire never erupts into frustration because it has already been converted into the steady light of discovery. His imagination burns with a white heat, yet it does not burn him. 10,000 failed experiments are not 10,000 reasons to quit. They are 10,000 affirmations of his faith in the law of cause and effect. This is the final secret I wish to impart. The highest use of your vital energy is not the conquest of others, but the contribution to the whole. The fire, once turned inward for self-mastery, eventually turns outward as light for the world. The man who has truly mastered himself begins to serve others not out of a cold sense of duty, but from a magnificent overflow of power. You will know you are nearing this state when your ambition no longer feels frantic or urgent. You will labor harder than you ever have, but without the sensation of strain. Your work will become your worship, a continuous prayer expressed through the excellence of your service. To live by this law is to be reborn each day. The fire that once sought to enslave you now serves to renew you. You no longer measure yourself against the fleeting shadow of other men's opinions, for your competition ended the moment your internal conflict ceased. You no longer pray for strength as a beggar craves a crust of bread, for strength has become your very nature. Every emotion you feel is now an instrument of your advancement. Love sharpens your purpose, and even sorrow is distilled into the fine wine of wisdom. The transmuted man does not fight temptation, he redefines it. What once tempted him to weakness now serves as a vivid reminder of his own power. He understands that the same pressure that once threatened to crush him is the very same pressure that now deepens his resolve. His work carries a weight beyond the measure of years. It endures because it was built upon order rather than excitement. When such a man finally passes from this earthly theater, his influence continues through the structure of his thought, embedded in the lives of all he touched. His existence becomes his greatest speech, and his silence carries more authority than 1,000 shouted proclamations. This peace, this magnificent command, is the reward for years of unwavering obedience to your purpose. It cannot be borrowed from a book, nor can it be inherited from a father. It must be lived into. The soul must prove itself worthy through 1,000 daily demonstrations of self-control. When that proof is finally given, life itself becomes your ally. Events begin to serve the master who serves the law. You will know you have reached this peak when your discipline no longer feels like a heavy yoke, but as natural as the breath in your lungs. I have mastered my inner fire. My passion builds, it no longer burns. Discipline is my peace. Desire is my servant. What once consumed me now sustains me. These are not words of pride. They are the acknowledgement of a law fulfilled. When you reach this state, you will look back upon your former divided self, that restless, uncertain drifter, and you will smile with compassion. You will realize that your chaos was necessary to reveal your order, and your weakness was the very clay from which your strength was formed. Transmutation was never about punishment, it was about evolution. It was about turning animal energy into divine expression and temporary desire into a timeless legacy. In this choice lies the only true freedom a man can ever know. For when the flame obeys you, nothing in the outer world can ever enslave you again. My friends, if these lessons have struck a chord within your own furnace of ambition, I invite you to join our circle of serious students. Subscribe to this channel to ensure you do not miss the further unveiling of these timeless principles. We are building a library of thought here that is intended to outlast the noise of the present age. Leave a comment below and tell me, what is the one definite purpose into which you will cast your fire today? By writing it, you begin the physical act of crystallization. Do not let this energy dissipate as you leave this screen. Guard your fire, direct it with a steady hand, and let it burn, not to consume your life, but to create a masterpiece. For the man who commands his inner fire does not merely live, he becomes a light unto the world.